Hello and welcome here to the Tampa Convention Center. We are live for an episode of Six Rotations. He's Mick. I'm Daniel Gilman. We're so happy to be with you as fans file in, and we are set for tonight's two semifinals. And Mick, what we're going to be doing here in this episode is breaking down the All-America teams, our Freshman of the Year, and of course, previewing both Nebraska-Pittsburgh and Wisconsin-Texas. And so, Mick, let's dive right into it, right? We've got a rematch of a couple national semifinals tonight. Right, you go all the way back to the 2020-21 season, Wisconsin-Texas. They also met here in Tampa 10 years ago, but we'll start with Nebraska-Pittsburgh, a rematch of the 2021 Final Four. Pittsburgh took the first set. Nebraska came storming through, reached the final, and of course lost to Wisconsin in 5. So let's set the stage here. What is the top matchup that you're excited for in this Nebraska-Pittsburgh duel? We've got a pair of six-rotation opposites. We've got a great matchup in the middle with a lot of youth, a lot of veterans on Pittsburgh's side, youth on Nebraska's side. Where do you sit?
Well, I'm very interested to watch to see if Nebraska's defense can get them through this match. Pittsburgh obviously is a slow starter by evidence to how many reverse sweeps they've come back against. But they're big at the net. Nebraska's good at the net, but not necessarily their strength. And Pittsburgh doesn't get going early, they could be in trouble. So it's going to be a really interesting match, and I think it's more about systems than it is about players. Beeson's a big leader for Nebraska. The freshman for Pittsburgh, if she can get into it right away, it'll be a fun match, no question about it. I can't pick a winner on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, you're talking about Olivia Babcock, the Freshman of the Year, and we only have two teams left that have six-rotation opposites. And so you've got Beeson matched up with Babcock. Why don't we rewind and see how these teams got here? For Nebraska, a sweep over Long Island, a sweep over Missouri, a sweep over Georgia Tech, and then we saw a fight from Arkansas, and it was Arkansas that showed up. We talked about him last episode. On the other side, not a lot of people are giving Pittsburgh hope. I think it's definitely a Nebraska-heavy fan base. It's a Nebraska-heavy neutral fans as well that may be thinking this is going to be a sweep. I wouldn't be so sure. Dan Fisher comes in very confident. In fact, Pittsburgh's the only team in the field that made the Final Four in 2021, 2022, and 2023, and you've got a really talented senior in Chia Nwokolo.
And that makes a lot of difference. Let me tell you, the number of times that you get there makes a lot of difference because you're just way more comfortable. Even if you have younger players helping you out, I have to give Pittsburgh a lot of credits there for being there that many times. But you better get Nebraska this year, because if you don't, you're going to have to pay the next couple of years.
So Pittsburgh swept Coppin State in the first round, and Dan Fisher talked about it in his press conference yesterday. Right when he saw the draw, he knew it was going to be a gauntlet. You face USC in the second round. That was a 4-set victory. But the sweep over Washington State might have been the most impressive regional performance of any team in the field, because Washington State had kind of been our darling here this season, and yet they didn't quite show up. In fact, Pitt against Washington State had offensive performances of 591, and then against Louisville, they hit 560 and 545 in the reverse sweep. So that's 3 of the best sets that we have seen of any tournament team this year. Meanwhile, no team has hit higher than 222 against the Huskers in any set of their last 3 matches. So that's going to be a bit of a sequence to see. If Pittsburgh can hit over 300 in a set, that'll break the chain.
Yeah, Nebraska's been pretty good ever since they lost to Wisconsin, and certainly that might have been the smartest thing they could do to get that monkey off their back. So I think you're right about all of this. We just have to see who shows up and who gets after it in the first set, and then watch and see who steps up. That's really what I want to see.
What do you think about this? John Cook at the press conference told the media that it was the best pre-Final Four practice he's ever seen. And I asked him, I followed up, I said, well, how many times have you said that to your team? He said never. And Bergen Riley talked about it too. She said the depth perception was a little bit weird at first in Amelie, but, quote, once we settled in, we felt very comfortable there. I'm curious to see kind of how things move on. What do you think from that comment from Cook?
I worry about that comment because I've seen a lot of teams win the warm-up, but you got to play the game. So pre-game practices, I think coaches prefer it when they have a terrible practice because it seems like it gets everybody focused.
Well, I'm curious to see how their warm-up will be here tonight because it's Nebraska and Pittsburgh, the first match of our Final Four. John Cook said the hardest match to win is actually not the semifinal, it's not the championship, it's the regional final.
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. I've been to so many regional finals. I've been in the 5-game matches, I've been in just about every situation, and I'll tell you what, once you get to the regional final, everything's on the line. The excitement of going to the Final Four is a possibility, and it is tough. It's tough to manage the kids. It's tough to manage the game. It's tough to manage your emotions sometimes.
So we talk about Babcock, freshman of the year, first team All-American. Rachel Fairbanks, also a first team All-American. And then Tori Stafford, who has been leading the way. She's a third team All-American, freshman outside. And Stafford leads all players in the tournament in passing percentage. So she takes 70% of the first balls, the serve receive. The question is, how will that translate into success? Because obviously Stafford has kind of led the way on the outside.
Pretty amazing for a freshman, don't you think?
Her and Babcock.
Yeah. Well, Babcock, the thing that Babcock does, you talk about her hitting percentage and all of that, but Babcock knocks you off the reception line with her serve. And she's a dual threat, not only at the net, blocking and hitting, but also serving. So she can score points in 3 different ways for you. Stafford's been amazing to put the ball up there, it helps them run their whole offense. I just haven't seen a freshman come in that comfortable, and Nebraska's going to serve them really, really tough. So Stafford will have to be good.
Well, if you're just joining us here, this is 6 Rotations. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman. Live episode of our podcast and YouTube show here at the convention. It's a coaches convention. So for all the non-coaches, of course, we're with you on YouTube. Let's move over to the other side, right? The freshman for Nebraska. Third team All-American Harper Murray. Second team All-American Bergen Riley, and then you've got the veterans, right? Merritt Beeson, Lexi Rodriguez, both named first team. It's Lexi's second first team nod and her third All-American campaign. When you look at the passing percentages, it is up there for these Nebraska players as well. Harper Murray, third in all of the field, passing 56% of the serve receives. How about this? Lexi passes on 40%. But has a 72% win rate when taking that first ball. You want to keep it away from the libero for Nebraska.
Absolutely. That's one. You serve as far away from her as you can. She's touching the first ball with that kind of accuracy. Your offense is pretty potent. But Nebraska hasn't always dominated offensively, even with the good passing. So their attack is not quite as good as the other 3 teams in the Final Four. The thing that they do, though, is they supplement that with good blocking, great defense, and great team chemistry.
I want to hear your thoughts about Merritt Beeson because we're going to get her front and center, the former Florida Gator, now first team All-American with Nebraska. But there are some connections because Dan Fisher was Merritt's coach in the Pan Am Championship 2 years ago when the United States won it all. Rachel Fairbanks was a teammate, and they talked about playing with Merritt. Do you feel like, having coached USA, when you have a player that you coach internationally, when you face them in college play, how does that factor in?
You know, I've talked to a lot of the players that have played together on international teams and then come back to their colleges. They just love to compete against each other. You know, it's not anything vindictive. It's just fun for them. They probably whisper under the net a little bit. They probably have a little fun like that, but it's really fun. I think good players appreciate good players, and they really enjoy competing against each other. Certainly there'll be some talk by the team that wins, but it's all in good fun, and it's all great competition, and that's the one thing about collegiate women's volleyball that's really fun to watch.
One thing that I'm really excited to see is this out-of-system ball matchup, because Dan Fisher talked about how Pittsburgh is more out-of-system and swinging on more out-of-system balls than he has seen in the past. And on the other side, Merritt Beeson and Harper Murray just take rips out of the back row. We talked about it on Monday, and Fisher mentioned it in his press conference. He said, Merritt is taking way more big swings than I have seen anyone else take, and she can make connections on bad balls almost better than she can on good balls.
Well, I think she sees the court better. I think she's a lot like Samantha Bricio, who I coached at USC, who was actually better out of the back row, and this is before we felt comfortable setting the back row in women's volleyball this much. I think Beeson sees the court much better out of the back row. I think the out-of-system balls are really important to watch, but I worry about Nebraska hitting those balls inbounds. I like Murray's aggressiveness. She goes after it. She's just fun for me to watch, but she gets in some situations where that ball goes long on her, and so you got to be careful with that.
Last couple fun facts here. The serving game is obviously going to be really important in this first semifinal. Olivia Babcock has the most aces in the NCAA tournament. 9 aces on 42 serves with that wicked topspin, and we see it from Beeson as well. That'll be a focal point. How about Kat Flood? She comes in as a serving specialist. She has 28 points scored in just 53 serves, including that important 5-0 run in the 5th set against Louisville.
A lot of times it's who's in the front row when you come in to serve, not just the aces, but if you can disrupt the first contact of the other team, it gives your big block a chance to score. It looks to me like they've inserted her at a position in the game when they have a great block in the front row, and that's helped her have that high score percentage.
And then I asked Chia Nwokolo, the senior veteran who came back for another year, her 3rd straight Final Four pin. I asked, was there one point in that match against Louisville that she knew the momentum had shifted? And she said, yes, we worked in practice on trying to get one specific block on DeBeer, and they finally got it in the 3rd set. And it was Fairbanks who stuffed DeBeer, and that's when Nwokolo knew, okay, we have more of a switch here. And also Alexis, the veteran setter for Pittsburgh, backup, led the conversation in the intermission when they switched sides. And that's what Rachel Fairbanks had mentioned. You know, having Alexis, having Rachel as those 2 setters on the floor with veteran presence is certainly important. Now, Mick, I don't want to ask you about predictions, but if you were to make one bold take on what you think, not who's going to win, but what's one prediction on what's going to happen in this first match?
I think you have to watch the errors. First thing is if whichever team is focused and in system right away, they have the best advantage. Certainly Pitt's had a lot of chances to come back and score 5-set wins from getting down, but they don't want to get behind Nebraska like they have the last couple of weeks with several teams.
All right, let's move on to the second semifinal. It'll be 30 minutes after our first match finishes. And this is a matchup between our 2022 and 2021 champions. It's Wisconsin, it's Texas, it's Kelly Sheffield, it's Jared Elliott. There's no hair involved. You're very familiar with this situation. 2 awesome coaches, 2 great humans. I'm very excited to watch it. It's a rematch of the 2020 Final Four in Omaha. Texas won. They ended up losing to Kentucky. It's also a rematch of the 2013 Final Four in Seattle that Wisconsin won and fell to Penn State. So these 2 teams familiar with each other, but in a way, we haven't seen this matchup in its newest form with all of these newer players. It's been 3 years.
No, you haven't. You have Texas coming off maybe one of their best matches played in the whole season.
Yeah.
Right? You've got Wisconsin, who plays well, hasn't played well, but boy, they seem to have the horses at the end all the time. This will be a really important match for Skinner from Texas to be good. If Skinner is not good, Texas is going to struggle.
I think she needs to be great, personally. And I also think Asia O'Neal is going to be in the center of attention. She was drafted #1 overall in the Pro Volleyball Federation draft a couple days ago. All of the light is on her. Here's your All-American announcements for this team. I think Texas may have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They got disrespected. Only 2 Longhorns were named All-Americans. Now, they were both first-teamers with O'Neal and Skinner, but I'm a little surprised Wisconsin only got 3, with Franklin first team, Smrek second team, Carter Booth, the other middle, in that third team. I'm a little surprised there's only 5 total All-Americans in this matchup.
I'll tell you, with both of these teams, it's been Franklin and Skinner.
Yeah.
You know, I can see the others being very good support players. I can see the setters doing a nice job, but not first team All-American jobs. I mean, the first team heavy lifting has been O'Neal and Skinner for Texas, and Franklin has shown up all the time, almost all year. I mean, she has just been the horse that's just bringing the cavalry every time.
Well, a reminder, this is 6 rotations for all of you guys joining us now here live at the Convention Center in Tampa, brought to you as always by SNA Sports. Now, Mick, how did we get here, right? Texas went 17-1 in the Big 12. Wisconsin, very similarly, dominated the regular season. 30-3 in the regular year, lost a couple matches without Anna Smrek, lost to Purdue and to Penn State, beat Nebraska, lost to Nebraska, finished second in the Big Ten. Texas lost the first set of the tournament to Texas A&M, ended up beating them in 4, swept SMU, and then had a match point down against Tennessee in the 4th set, survived it, beat Tennessee in 5, and then topped Stanford on the road in 4 sets. On the other side, Wisconsin swept Jackson State, swept Miami, beat Penn State in 4, and then really handedly took care of Oregon. Oregon did win 1 set, but Wisconsin was in full control. Who do you give the edge to? Because Jared Elliott says that he's the underdog, and he thinks that Nebraska fans might be rooting for him.
I doubt that. I think that Elliott is not the underdog. I think he's played more intense matches through the tournament. I think his players are sensitive to that, and I don't think they'll have trouble getting focused because they've been through so many of these tight matches to get to this point. I think they'll be ready to play as good as they can play. Like I said, though, their stars have to be stars in this particular match. Wisconsin takes the chance of having a hot Texas come get on top of them and having to play from behind and not being able to use the high velocity serving that they like to employ. So if Texas can play ahead, there's a great chance for Texas to win this match, simply because Wisconsin hasn't had to play 3, 4, or 5 games of high level intensity throughout a whole match.
It's a good point. I'm very curious to see where the fans will be rooting, because that's always important. How many Texas fans will show up? How many Wisconsin fans show up? And who will Nebraska and Pittsburgh fans be rooting for in this night match? Now, remember last year, the night match went late. It was Pittsburgh and Louisville, and they went 5 sets, and it was past 11 or midnight. I don't think necessarily fans will care this year how late it goes. I think they're locked in.
I just want to see the matches.
Yeah.
These are 2 exceptionally good matchups, and the matches should be exceptionally good.
Now, 3 of these 4 teams have won a championship in the last decade, right? We've talked about the last 2 champions, Wisconsin, Texas. Of course, Nebraska won it in the last 6 years as well. Pittsburgh has never been to the NCAA final. That is what is on the line for them. Diving into the X's and O's here, though, we have the 2 top out-of-system swingers in the entire field. 67 out-of-system swings for Sarah Franklin, 61 for Madison Skinner. The difference, Franklin is executing at a 14% efficiency rate, while Skinner is terminating at a 45% execution rate.
Yeah, I think the way Skinner flies to the ball gives her an advantage out of the back row. Franklin is not a great hitter out of the back row, but she makes up for it. You can set the ball right on top of the tape in the front row, and she will come and hit that cut shot 2 feet away from the net cross court. Nobody has been able to stop that. And so she makes up for out-of-system swings by positional shots, hitting deep corners, rolling the ball over the top. Those are not balls that are going to score, but put the other team on the defensive or takes the other team to setter out so that they have to hit out of system back at them. So there's a couple of things that have been going on with Wisconsin. Different players and different people in different systems have different responsibilities. I think if Franklin can see the court and can get a good approach, she will swing out of the back row.
And you know, obviously you've watched a ton of Texas this season. One thing that Kelly Sheffield mentioned that really stood out to me in the press conference is that Madison Skinner has a higher hitting percentage at 1 option balls than she does with 3 option balls. What that means is when you have 3 options as a setter, you allow your offensive players to have a better chance, right? You bring the blockers different ways. When the only option is Madison Skinner, she still executes at a higher rate.
Well, or she knows she only has 1 option and she goes for it.
Right.
And you know, sometimes keeping it simple is the best way to approach those kinds of things. If you've got 3 options, you have to make choices. Sometimes choices cost you because you hesitate or you think, I'll wait till the last minute and then choose. So I think those are all part of the game. I just think they work well for some people and don't work as well for other people.
So we talked a bit about how much serve-receive plays into that first matchup. Sarah Franklin takes 80% of the serves. A ridiculous mark, leading all of the players in the NCAA tournament. It's really incredible, her story, right? Sarah Franklin comes back to her home state. She said there are going to be so many people that are going to be coming to this match in Sarah's family and friends. Her health situation was, quote, unfathomable how it was able to play out like it did. I have goosebumps talking about Sarah Franklin because I remember talking about it in the first episode of our year, mentioning how devastating the news was that Franklin may be out for her career. And now here she sits 4 months later, the favorite to win the championship.
So I'll ask you this. Do you think Texas has the stomach to try to starve Franklin? Because she gets her rhythm off of touching the ball.
Yeah.
If she touches the ball twice in each rally, think how good she gets. And if you starved her, just as a thought, if you starved her and did not ever serve her a ball.
Let me ask you then, if you do that, what does it do for her availability to get out into space? Isn't that the point of serving the top players so that they have to get their serve receive? If you don't serve it to her, doesn't she get to put herself in great position?
I would think yes, and I would think that's why everybody serves her. But
it doesn't work.
I remember when we played Brazil in the semifinals of the Olympics, not the semifinals, but the end of the pool in the Olympics. And I looked at the stats on paper, and those left front hitters for Brazil had gotten served every ball by everybody in the Olympics up to that point, but nobody served them when they were in the back row when they weren't hitting. And so we did that. But I'm thinking that Texas has to come up with a strategy that's going to surprise Wisconsin a little bit and try to get them on top. And wouldn't it be good if Franklin couldn't get into the match until the 3rd set? You know,
it's certainly a point of emphasis and something we will definitely be looking at. Also, big news, of course, tonight's semifinals will be on ESPN. Courtney Lyle, Holly McPeak, Katie George leading the way. We've got Eric Freed and Missy Whittemore with the pregame and mid-match coverage. Here's a little bit of ESPN news for you. We finished the year, ESPN averaged over 115,000 viewers per match this year, up 58% from last year. So what they're going to do is they're going to have a simulcast on ESPN Plus tonight with an alternate high end zone viewing option for the coaches that like to watch VolleyMetrics.
Well, I hope it don't get too high because I like end zone and I like about net height, and I can see everything I need to see. If they go too high, it's nice to look down at positional situations, but you can't really get the feel of the decision making by the players. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
I do want to talk a little bit about Tampa, because here we are, the weather is unbelievable. It's like 72 degrees with a light wind. It is a lot better than Omaha, where it was 15 degrees and snowing. And this is what Jared Elliott said. He thinks that we should play in Tampa every single year. He's got the fondest memories of 2009 the best final in volleyball history, he said, when Penn State reverse swept Texas in the final, 16-14 in that final set. Elliott said it was the toughest loss he'd ever had. What do you think about the possibility of keeping the Final Four in the same place, or do you like rotating it?
Well, I love warm weather.
I do too.
And that makes the convention, that makes the tournaments, that makes it so much easier for everybody. But you have to take the tournament around the country. The reason the country has exploded in volleyball is that the AVCA and the NC2A have partnered to take the convention and the tournament to all different places in the middle of the country where the outsides of the country can come to the sport. And that's worked well. I remember when I had to go play regionals in Hawaii, 2 time zones away from the West Coast, and then go to San Antonio, 3 time zones away from California. That's 5 time zones. We went directly from Hawaii to San Antonio and still lost in the regional finals. So, you know, the first round of the Final Four. So it's hard on the teams if you go to the extreme outsides of the,
That's a good point.
The country. But it's certainly been good for the Midwest, with all the sites being Indianapolis, Columbus, St. Louis, Kansas City, those kinds of spots. Everybody's been able to get to by driving or short flights, and it's really developed the sport, I think.
Now, this is Texas's 11th national semifinal since 2008. That's the most in the NCAA. The question is, will we have a repeat champion? That's going to be a fun one to watch. Now, someone pointed out that Asia O'Neal's been called the slide queen, and Madison Skinner was really happy about that. She said, we got to get shirts printed, respect the slide queen, focus on the slide. I want to ask you, as a defense, if you're Wisconsin's middle, if you're Carter Booth, if you're on the outside and you're Smrek, how do you defend Asia O'Neal?
I think you serve them as tough as you can so that the first contact makes the setter Swindell have to move a lot, because she's not totally comfortable setting that set yet, and that's why you didn't see O'Neal in the high stats early in the season, because it took Swindell 2/3 of the season to get contact and get good communication with where to put that ball for O'Neal. O'Neal is now starting to elevate on the ball. They've slowed the ball down, put it a little higher and let it drop, and O'Neal can use her vertical to go up and hit the shots. And they've got that figured out now. Right now, if Wisconsin wants to get away from that, they've got to keep that first contact from getting up there to Swindell.
Yeah, I asked Asia how she would compare herself or what she sees when she watches Anna Smrek play, and obviously the first thing she said is, well, she's way taller than me. And she didn't quite give me an answer on comparisons or similarities, which is what I wanted. But we had this great graphic that popped up on the ESPN broadcast that compared Wisconsin's heights to the top NBA players. Did you see this? You got Anna Smrek with LeBron James, and then Carter Booth with Jimmy Butler, Sarah Franklin, Jamal Murray, Crawford, and Robinson. There was a cool story that came out. I think it was Dennis Punzel with Wisconsin. Sheffield called Crawford during the Final Four 2 years ago, right before Wisconsin advanced to the championship, to try to get her to transfer over from Kansas. And that was a really heartfelt story. How many conversations do you think are happening this weekend with our 4 coaches trying to get new talent for next year?
I'm telling you, I would not speculate on that at all. I would say a lot, and I'd leave it alone at that, because right now it's a wild, wild west out there, and people will do about anything to improve the quality of their team.
All right, last thing I want to talk about here. A lot of the conversations during the press conferences were about instant replay and how slow it has been, the review systems. Some of the coaches mentioned the international play needs to be an example, and obviously budgetary restraints are one thing. But when it comes to the final, don't you kind of situate yourself into a spot where you can have the higher level replay officials, the higher level replay system? Why can't we get these 30, 45-second reviews?
Well, it's difficult to change the system that you play the regular season with in the tournament. Nobody likes to change the rules or the way you go about things when you do that. However, I think that the costs are coming down for this high-level video, and actually internationally they don't even use lines judges anymore, because the video is so good and the referee sees where the ball lands before they have to make a call and can just make the call. So I think it's just a matter of companies making that stuff available at a cost that institutions can purchase right now, but it's got to be a low enough cost that all Division I institutions can afford to purchase it. Otherwise, it makes the game kind of up and down and different, and you just don't like to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we almost saw it with Nebraska. They almost won the regional final on a replay review. Maybe they should have. It looked like a net violation there on that final challenge, but Nebraska didn't get the call. However, we know that they did get it against Wisconsin in that first matchup, and it was such a disappointment to have this 2-minute review at 15-14 and have it overturn and give them the match at 15-13, and it was just crappy as a fan to see that finish. So I just am going to cross my fingers here and pray that tonight does not depend on a challenge late in the match, and that's what I'm going to hope. Mick, any other final thoughts of Wisconsin-Texas here before we wrap things up?
No, it's a big match. I think Texas has to come out ready to play. I think they have to play ahead. That would be my thought. Wisconsin, on the other hand, hasn't had a lot of really stressful matches. They can come out free, maybe play well right away, get on top of them, but if they don't, we're going to have a pretty competitive match, and it could go 4 or 5 sets. All
right, all the action starts at 7 o'clock on ESPN here tonight, here from the Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. One last thing, the NIVC was decided on Tuesday night in El Paso. Wichita State hoists the trophy out of the AAC. They swept UTEP on the road, a sold-out Memorial Gym in El Paso, and so congratulations to Wichita State. Yeah. Talented team with some good players. Izzy Strand wins Most Outstanding Player, transfer from UC San Diego.
Yeah, Wichita State has been good. They've been in the NC2A tournament. We played them in the regionals in Texas a few years ago. It looks like he's got that program coming back now, so you're going to see programs be strong, be weak because of the quick changeover of players. When people quit entering the portal at such great numbers and we get rid of the 6-year, 7-year, and 8-year players, which has made the game really fun this year, then you'll probably see the teams be more consistent year in and year out.
Well, I'm excited to find out. It's been a great year. It's been a phenomenal tournament. Things will wrap up on Thursday and then Sunday with a 3 o'clock Eastern time final on ABC. So set your DVRs. Make sure that you're recording everything. And as always, drop your comments who you think will be advancing. Maybe some bonus points if you can correctly predict both winners tonight and which sets they go to. If there's one person that gets all 4 correct, how many sets, how many teams win, you will be in line for a special prize. Yes, that's what we're going to do. As always, we're wrapping things up. He's Mick. I'm Daniel. Thanks for tuning in to this in-person special presentation of 6 Rotations.